here you have something which is simply unprecedented. The most powerful country in the world carries out a surgical operation and simply scoops up the president. Now, the Venezuelan president was not democratic. I mean, he lost elections in 2024, and Venezuela's in crisis. But you really have something unprecedented that you just scoop up the president of a country and bring him to the United States. The other thing is we've never seen a head of state in the United States saying, "I am now the acting president of another country." But Trump declared, and I'm sure you saw this, any of the listeners have saw this, maybe I think it was 3 days ago or 4 days ago. He put up a post saying, "I am the acting president of Venezuela." I mean, that is simply unprecedented. But the other thing is you have to see that Venezuela is taking place parallel to, as part of, other things taking place around the world that are unprecedented. The United States has said that it is going to take over the easy way or the hard way, Greenland. Right. And that may mean a military attack against another NATO power. So, so these events are really, they, for me, are signaling the collapse of the post-World War II international order that established a so-called rules-based order, where, of course, those rules were always violated by the United States, as you pointed out already, and by other countries. But nevertheless, there was some institutional organization to the world system. And all of that is collapsing. So it's not just Venezuela. It's what's going on with Greenland. It's what's going on with a rupture in, if we want to call it bourgeois democracy, we can do that. But a rupture of bourgeois democracy. We're going from capitalist democracy to fascism here in the United States. The breakdown of the rule of law internal to the United States, and so forth, and so on. So the point is that the U.S. intervention in a Latin American country is not new. You're absolutely right. But one, the nature of that intervention, and secondly, that intervention is part of a cascade of things taking place right now, which signal a fundamental watershed, and a very, very scary and dangerous one at that.
Yeah, so we have one of the problems that I'm facing at the moment is that there's just so many individual things going on that are all that I very much, I mean, we all feel they are very much interconnected and interlinked, but they are such a chain of events now, not just a chain, but like several chains happening parallelly to each other. I mean, we still have an ongoing genocide in Gaza, despite a peace agreement and whatnot, and a UN resolution on it from the Security Council. The Israel still keeps killing people in Gaza and has demolished over 2,000 houses since the peace not agreement, but since the ceasefire. We have the UN rapporteur for the Palestinian cause. Sorry, I butchered her title, but Francesca Albanese. She is sanctioned by the United Nations, by the United States. The United States sanctions the International Criminal Court. At the same time, the International Criminal Court has also out an arrest warrant for Vladimir Putin, which the United States applauded. We have the European Union sanctioning analysts and journalists inside Europe. In the UK, we have it's now forbidden to basically protest in favor of a protest group for Palestinian rights. The people are being arrested. In the United States, you have ICE cracking down on immigrants, but just as well on US citizens. They basically roam free, and we talked before, it very much resembles already a paramilitary structure. We have Iran, we have Venezuela, we have Greenland, we have the war in Ukraine, there's so many things going on, and they are all very bad. And one thing that unites them is that they emanate from the West, or what I call the larger West.
Right. But I want to take that a step further, because you're right that in terms of actual events taking place and the agents and the actors that are undertaking those events, it emanates from the West. But I am suggesting something deeper. I am suggesting that that global capitalism is in a deep historical structural crisis, is what I termed, and you opened up the interview mentioning my new book. It's an epochal crisis. And so, yes, the actual actions unfolding in front of us that you just described emanate from the West, but there's a larger world's historic structural context and explanation for this cascade of events that we can barely keep up with. And I hope we get into that. But before we do, I want to say that, and when I was listing Greenland and and the end of the threat to end bourgeois democracy in the United States, and the attack on Venezuela, and I said so forth and so on. So you have added other elements, and we have to see all of this as a package. And although I said that this attack on Venezuela is kind of the nail that puts the what is it? The nail in the coffin, which finally seals the coffin of the post-World War II international order. It's now collapsing right before our eyes, literally as we speak. But it's really started to collapse, and this happened extremely quickly with the two great events that you also mentioned: the Russian invasion of Ukraine and the West's radical political, military, economic response to that invasion. Radical, not in a good way. The invasion was bad. The Western response is bad, in my view, in my analysis. And secondly, the genocide in Palestine. Those two events were the beginning of the end, and now it is the nail in the coffin of this international order. And what is so, not just the tragedy and the unbelievable crime of that ongoing genocide, which, as you pointed out, the ceasefire it's a fake ceasefire, and we've simply gone from high-intensity genocide to low-intensity genocide. But I think we really need to stress that the impunity that the genocidaires have enjoyed to date, paved the way for also what Trump is doing in Venezuela, and they do in Greenland, because the West is saying to Israel, it's fine, you did that genocide. We might do some lightweight denunciations of genocide, but go ahead, and we'll continue to give you weapons. And that opened the way for that impunity. Means that now the U.S. can do whatever it wants with utter disregard for international laws and norms. And I want to repeat, maybe not all of the listeners heard what Trump said. Trump was interviewed by the New York Times on January 6th, and they pointed out, the New York Times interviewers, and you're right about what you said about the New York Times, by the way, what they're focusing on and what they don't focus on. But the people interviewing Trump said, well, are you bound by any international laws? And he said, no, none whatsoever. They said, well, what are you bound by? Where are your constraints? What are the guardrails here? And he said, my own morality, and that's it.